Hey everybody, and welcome aboard our pitch black Cessna. Believe it or not, there's a full moon outside, and I can just about see normally now that my eyes have adjusted. Unfortunately, you probably won't be able to tell this on the camera. I got a request from a fellow CFI to do a video on night flying and how to find home sweet Skylark in the dark. So this one's for you, my friend. You know who you are. A lot of GA pilots don't like to fly at night, and there's a good reason for that. When you fly in the dark, you accept more risk. Just about everything except maybe spotting oncoming air traffic is more difficult when it's dark out. Unexpected failures of aircraft equipment can also be much more critical. Risks need to be assessed on their likelihood of happening and just how critical they are to safe flight in the event that they do indeed occur. The FAA suggests that pilots use a risk assessment matrix to help assess the risks in the decisions that we make and the likelihood of equipment failures. Let's run through a few examples. Since we're going to be flying at night, let's use the example of our landing light burning out. The likelihood of this happening is probably occasional or remote. In the daytime, a burned out landing light has a negligible impact on our ability to complete the flight safely. So that's a low risk. At night, however, that severity might creep up into the critical, particularly if we have to sneak back into a poorly lit field with obstacles like Skylark. Alright, let's try another one. An aviation favorite. What happens if that fan out front that keeps the pilot cool stops turning? An old saying goes that if your engine quits at night, don't panic. Wait until you're just above the ground and turn the landing light on. If you like what you see, go ahead and land. If you don't, turn that landing light off. An engine failure at any time is without a doubt a serious emergency. But in the daylight, at least we have a better chance of seeing a safe place to set down. At night, an empty pasture looks just the same as a forest of 100-year-old maple trees or oak trees. So while the probability of an engine failure in a properly maintained airplane is improbable or remote, the severity of one goes from perhaps critical during the day to catastrophic at night. And that's probably reason number one why a lot of people don't like to fly at night. However, this risk can be managed. If you're planning a night cross-country, you might want to make special considerations when you're planning your route. Let's say you're heading to Ithaca, New York from Skylark to pick up your sister who's been visiting a friend. Taking a direct route puts you right over the Catskill Mountains with no options should you lose your engine in that middle 52 or so miles. Meanwhile, curving slightly north towards Albany puts you over many airports, towns, and roadways that would be lit and offer you a better chance of finding somewhere to land. The price of that insurance? Well, 10 miles or about 5 minutes of flying in a Cessna 172 Piper Cherokee type airplane. On a 2-hour cross-country, peace of mind is well worth that 5 minutes. Another thing to consider is cruise altitude. Choosing a higher cruise altitude at night is probably a good idea too. Again, this gives you more time to think and more options should a failure happen. Okay, I've talked long enough. Let's go flying. As private pilots, 5 hours of training must be spent on flying at night. Another 3 hours must be spent on instrument flying. Everyone likes to say that this is so you will understand how to get yourself out of a cloud should you ever fly into one inadvertently. This is only half right in my mind. If you're flying at night with no moon over the middle of nowhere, it could be perfectly clear, but you would still have no idea which way is up and which way is down without looking at your instruments. I did a lot of night cross-country flying in northern New York in the Adirondacks, and there were at least 3 instances that I recall where I became disoriented on a clear night. Trust your instruments and keep them in your scan. Doubling back to the risk matrix, the probability of becoming disoriented at night increases dramatically, particularly over unlit terrain under an overcast or when the moon isn't out. The severity of that risk also increases. Instead of a low or medium risk, you could be dealing with a serious or high risk if you aren't sharp at instrument flying. Tonight we're going to head up to Westfield to practice some landings. I called up approach control since runway 24 is in use at Bradley, and we're going to cross the final approach course. Springfield is well lit, so I'm going to fly right to where the bright lights are, hang a left, and look for the runway lights at Westfield. It's after 10 o'clock, so Westfield Tower is closed. The lights are pilot controlled now. Click your microphone 3 times to turn them on to low intensity, 5 for medium, 7 for high. If you're going into an unfamiliar airport, make sure you read the AFD. The runway lights might be on a different frequency than you're used to. Have a look at 0 Golf 6 in Williams County, Ohio. See? CTAF is 122.8, but lights are on 123.0. That was a nasty surprise for me on our way to Oshkosh in 2016. Landing at night is a little different than landing in broad daylight. Our depth perception doesn't work as well at night, so it might be hard to tell just how high off the ground you actually are. I did 5 landings on this particular evening, and I flared too high on 4. More practice is required. The general technique is to treat a night landing like a soft field landing. What you do is you get over the runway, and then crack the throttle at about 100 RPM or so to flatten the approach and just wait for the wheels to touch. When they do, it becomes a normal landing. This isn't always an option at a short runway, but it's a good practice when you do have that option. Currency requirements say that 3 night landings need to be made to a full stop every 90 days to carry passengers at night. I'm making this one a touch and go, and then we're going back to Skylark. I already did 3 to a full stop before this. You might be wondering about the panel lighting. Cessna did a fantastic job when designing the panel lights on the 140. The bulbs reflect on the interior of the false panel and illuminate the instruments well. Panel lighting should be kept to a minimum to preserve night vision. Additional lighting should only come from red flashlights to limit glare. Headlamps work really well. Some people think I'm crazy for cruising around in a 73-year-old airplane in the dark, but the panel lights in this airplane are better than any 172 or Cherokee that I've flown. Now that we're on the go here at Westfield, let's talk about how to get back into Skylark. I'm going to show you one of the many techniques that I've used to find the airport in the dark. Skylark is tricky enough to find in the daytime, let alone at night. Probably the best option is to get flight following and go GPS direct to the airport. When you're inside about a mile, turn the runway lights on. We're going to do something a little different this evening. I'm going to fly directly between Skylark and Ellington and head south, heading 180. With Ellington lit up on my left and Bradley lit up on my right, I'll click the lights on and instantly see the airport. I don't usually believe in flying straight-in approaches to Skylark, but at night I make an exception and land straight into runway 28. Here's the view off my right wing. There's Bradley and the I-91 bridge all lit up. Look in the black area about halfway up the left edge of your screen, and I'm going to turn on the lights. See it? Let's make our right turn to our 2-mile final. One of my tricks for finding airports in the dark is to wait until I'm almost on top of the airport before I turn the lights on. Turning them on too early doesn't make the airport pop out at you when the lights flick on. My way isn't the only way of doing things, but it's served me well so far. While we crawl in on our long final, I'd like to say thanks again to my CFI friend for the video suggestion. It was a fun excuse to stay proficient. I'd also like to comment that landing at Skylark at night is particularly hazardous right now due to there not being any paint on the runway. There's nothing white reflecting back at you at night to help you judge your height. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. At least it will give me an excuse for my lousy landing in a moment. Pilots often grumble about there not being a VASI or a PAPI at Skylark because of the close proximity of the trees to the runway. How do you know if you're going to hit them? It's easy. If the red runway end lights are flickering through the tops of the trees, but you can still clearly see them, you're not going to hit the trees. Make sure that you can always see the green displaced threshold lights clearly. There you have it, a poor man's VASI. If you're too high, you'll see the red and the green lights very clearly. If you can't see the red lights at all, you're too low. The same concept applies in the daylight, by the way. Keep the fence at the end of the 2-8 end of the runway, lined up with the tops of the trees, and you'll nail your approach every time. Thanks for tagging along. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, leave me a note below. Blue skies, and keep the shiny side up.